Oh, nice.
Morning. It is Wednesday, October 20th. We're going to be talking about Zusya on the Roof from Nicole Krauss's To Be a Man. And a few more people are coming in. Oh, here's one more person. So there is I don't know if it's a midrash, but I want to read the part about Zusya to you. Rabbi Zusya was an early Hasidic rabbi and a well-known tzaddik, righteous person, who lived between 1718 and 1800. When Rabbi Zusya was on his deathbed, his students found him in uncontrollable tears. They tried to comfort him by telling him that he was almost as wise as Moses and as kind as Abraham, so he was sure to be judged positively in heaven. He replied, "When I get to heaven, I will not be asked, 'Why weren't you like Moses?' or 'Why weren't you like Abraham?' They will ask, 'Why weren't you like Zusya? Why didn't you fully live up to your own potential?'" In the story, Brodman dreams an ending for the fable. Because I was a Jew, there was no room left to be anything else, not even Zusya. So this little, quote of that you have to fulfill, and I'm not as good as this one, but you have to be as good as Vanessa or Sue or Lynn. And I hanging out with a lot of rabbis, they tell this story all the time. This is a frequent flyer story with rabbis. But I think especially when this goes for any age, but especially when, if you're working with kids who are, battling whatever they're battling, cliques, anxiety, and of course, after COVID, that is all ratcheted up. But what do you think? What do you think that means? About what Brodman said? Lynn.
I have to say that I'm almost finished with Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and I so recommend this book to everyone. And it made this story come alive for me. Frankl's whole thrust is that you have to be you, and you have to find meaning within you, and you can't have somebody tell you what you should be or how you should be or why you should be. And to reach your full potential, you need to find within yourself your core values and principles. So this man suffered greatly because he never was himself. And he says that in the story. So I think she did a wonderful job here of showing someone who thought he should be a certain way out of duty. And this baby has a whole life ahead of him. And is sort of an inspiration to Zusya. Is it Zusya? I don't know.
Zusya.
Isn't it? And that's why he's on the roof at the end. He's reborn, and he's. I think that's it. I mean, why? That old saying, "Why let the perfect be the enemy of the good?" I mean, why do you have to be Abraham? Why do you have to write the masterpiece? Isn't that what he's working on here, which he can't even do?
Right.
I mean, why not do instead of think about doing?
Right.
And isn't Judaism about the deed over the word? So that's what I got out of the story. I thought it was great.
Well, I will definitely say that Reform Judaism is about deed. And that's, the prophetic version and vision of Judaism. If you asked an Orthodox man, especially, and this is to be a man, the putting on tefillin, the you are obligated to all of these mitzvot. And the women are not obligated except for lighting candles. They're not obligated to time-centered mitzvot. You don't have to get up every morning to pray because you have children, but you're obligated to lighting candles. And there's one other. So which and so he feels that he's obligated to do all of this. And then, you know, that depletes him doing all of the mitzvot. He has nothing left. Anyone else about the story, your impressions?
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. So this, you know, this is, one of the reviewers said this is like her most Jewish story. You know, especially with the story of Zusya, and it's also at a Brit Milah. That's the setting, you know, at the end. And jumping to the end, you know, when he took the baby, part of me couldn't get over the fact that I hope he doesn't fall, and why is he taking the baby? And I realized that all of that, and Lynn, I think you're right, that, you know, a metaphor for being reborn, and he's trying to save. It is, you know, when you think about it, and when, if you've never been to a Brit, or you bring somebody who's not Jewish to a Brit, and they're like, you're going to watch the circumcision, and then you're going to have this big, you know, this big breakfast, because circumcisions are usually in the morning. You know, it is quite the ritual. And I have seen in the paper and on different things, you know, on social media, Jewish women saying they do not want to circumcise their sons, that it's a barbaric custom. And you know, I have a lot of, you know, interfaith families, and you know, they say, well, we hope that the first one's not a boy, because a Brit is, you know, it's a big step, and it's a big step. Lynn.
I don't know about the rest of you, but as I was reading this, we've read a lot of stories about people rejecting their past. And I've always thought that that's not good, to reject your past. In this story, I feel like there is this tension about how much of your past do you revere, and how much of it should you reject or move on, or what? I mean, and his daughters totally rejected, to me, they rejected their I don't know, would you say their Judaism or their?
Except that we're at a Brit Milah, so they haven't rejected that. And that, I felt good about that. Lily Meyer from NPR says, to be a man is, with only two exceptions, squarely located in the present and oriented toward the future. One exception is another book we'll get to. Krauss seems to have stopped asking how we might best relate to the long 20th century and begin asking how we might best live in the 21st. That we, I should know, tends to be Jewish, but not always. To be a man, Krauss tends to wrestle either with Judaism or with masculine power, though inevitably the two intertwine. The collection's most explicitly Jewish story is Zusya on the Roof. Elaine.
Really, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the story was very sad, and I felt sorry for him, and it didn't seem like he had much of a life. And I mean, I realized that the man was in his 80s and was ill, but I just felt sad. about the story, and sad about his relationship with the baby. He just seemed like a very sad, lost character.
Yeah, I agree. Sue.
I thought that it took a near-death or death experience for him to look at his life. Had it not been for that, he would have just kept going along and holed up in his back room trying to write, blah, blah. But this near-death or death experience caused him to revisit, and it never occurred to him as presented. It never occurred to him that maybe he was on the wrong track, that maybe he should question something, that maybe he should take a left turn instead of a right. You know, that's what was so profound. And I don't know that it takes something so dramatic as a near-death experience, but isn't there a point in all of our lives that we kind of look back and say, not necessarily that you wish you'd done something differently, but how the choices you made led to this point?
Absolutely.
I think that's a very common,
Yeah.
at least it is to me. It's
I
my
agree.
commonality. And that's what I kind of thought this whole story was about. Not just, it was about things on many levels, but clearly not just about the choices he made about following his parents' expectations, but never questioning what he wanted and how he was going to get it, or trying something different. And that was the sad part, but hopeful, because now he has a new baby.
Exactly. Okay, Abby, then Brenda, then Ellen, then Merle. Oh my God, I gotta write that down. All right, Abby, go.
Yeah, I just found it almost suffocatingly depressing. Parts of it I just had to stop and it couldn't go on, and then I would go back to it after, and a lot of it maybe was because of some personal history the last couple of years here, but I went back and started to read it again very, very early this morning. I didn't finish it, and I think that what Lynn said is helpful, because I think I'm going to go back and read part of Viktor Frankl's whatever, because I think that would give me a different perspective on it. But at one point I wanted to say, well, I was thinking that so much of, you don't know to look at the other options if you haven't been given that thought or that opportunity. You don't even know that there are other options. But his whole history was so immersed in history. So that's all he knew, was just going back to what this Rebbe said, or this point in history, and so on and so forth. And I just felt like I wanted to run out to Whole Foods and get a whole bunch of sage and kind of clear everything out. So you didn't ask if we cared for the story. I really didn't. But I think that when I finished rereading it, and I'm always so enlightened after listening to everybody else. So I don't know if I have an opinion, but my initial opinion was, oh, why am I reading this?
All right, we have 45 minutes to change your opinion. And listen, I think when you come in and listen, when everyone loves the story, the conversation could fall flat. But when you're struggling with it and you have to talk about it with someone, I just keep picturing him on the roof with this an eight-day-old baby, and I can't quite get over that. All right, I wrote it down.
I did have another thought, though.
Yes.
That did occur to me, because I think shortly earlier in the day I was reading a brief article from, maybe it was Atlantic or someplace, on some of the countries that are reversing this whole thing about, finding out who your sperm donors are. And there was an article by somebody who really was proud of, it was almost a badge of honor that he was a child of a sperm donor, until all of a sudden he became either a father or a grandfather, and all of a sudden realized how important it was to know that. And I had a flashback while I was reading this as he was holding the baby.
Interesting. Okay, Brenda, then Ellen, then Merle. Brenda, and then Joyce.
Okay, I think I might have taken a very simplistic look at what the story is about. And I looked at the title, Zusya on the Roof, and I kind of compared it with the movie Fiddler on the Roof.
Oh.
I thought of Broden as being Tevye, and Tevye was following tradition, which is what Brodman did. And he then had to deal with all these changes with his family, and the same with Brodman, even to the fact that he died and supposedly came back. There was a point in Fiddler on the Roof where Tevye is speaking to his ancestors, getting advice. And I think I think Brodman, his wife and children are way different than he is. And at first he finds it very difficult to accept because he's so ingrained in the tradition that his parents taught him. But I think eventually he does change. I was troubled by the ending because I also was afraid, is he gonna jump off the roof? Is he gonna, that bothered me. Okay.
All right. Yeah, I love I'm thinking about Fiddler on the Roof because it does explain some stuff. Ellen.
Yeah, I thought that, Brenda, that was very interesting, the Fiddler on the Roof reference. I read it the first time. I agree with Evie. I read it the first time and I wasn't sure, I talk about the ending, whether, he had been so ill that I thought maybe it was going to be part of his hallucination or whatever when he was ill. But when I reread it, I was much more, maybe I was already ready for the depressing part. He was seizing the opportunity almost to, carpe diem in terms of he hadn't had a chance with the new baby. He was always being attended to and he never got to see him. So, was it fair to the family who was so worried? That was probably, he said, they're probably putting out APBs all over, in terms of the baby, but he was seizing the opportunity. And certainly she's such a good writer in the sense of, this is two stories now where she sets it up in the very beginning and then at the end, and ends up there. I mean, this one was well, the other one was reflective also, but I mean, there's so much reflection of his life in terms of, the disrespect of the one daughter and the daughter who was now going to be mad at him because he took her baby. But, as someone said, that it's all things that we go through in our analysis throughout life to make ourselves focus. The whole thing about how you have to be responsible for yourself. You shouldn't be just trying to be like somebody else.
Yeah, I like that too. Merle?
Okay, well, Nicole Krauss is not the first person who thought of this. Jerry Seinfeld did an episode in 1993 called The Briss, where Kramer rescues a baby from being circumcised. But I felt that she made it very clear what his revelation is. And there's a quote, he had died and been called back so that he might instruct the child and set him on a different path. And so that raises the question, what will be the different path that he's going to set this child on? And we find out that the way he's going to set him on a different path is by rescuing the baby from the ritual that will be the first step toward binding that child to Judaism. And so he's going to rescue him from the bris, because what was the bris? It was a covenant between God and Abraham that this would go on for generations and generations. So I think by rescuing the baby from the bris, and I don't think he's going to jump off the roof. That was not my impression. He just wants to save him. He's accomplishing two things. One, he is no longer like Zusya. He's taking action like his daughter Carol, and he does respect that part of her. He's taking action. And two, he really is setting the baby on a different path, because now he doesn't feel like the baby is bound to this horrible history that Jews have of a terrible burden and always being the victim of anti-Semitism. So in a way, the end was happy for him. Mm-hmm. He's rescued the baby and he has taken on the identity that he wanted to have.
Yes, very interesting. Joyce, and then Izzy, then Sandy.
I had some trouble with the story in that Brodman was such an angry man that he was almost unlikable. I wasn't surprised that neither of his daughters could relate to him. He was always yelling at his wife. Even at the end, when she went to get him clothes, he was still angry, supposedly after he had his epiphany. And unfortunately, he reminded me of my father, so I couldn't get past that image, and therefore I had a lot of difficulty in that relationship.
Yeah,
So-
I keep thinking of the title of the book, To Be a Man. And certainly Broadman just, getting angry and, that part of the stuff brought it home to me. Izzy?
I just want to ditto what Joyce said. I really did not like the man. I disliked him. And I disliked his relationship with his wife. He was so judgmental about his gay daughter. His other daughter was in Israel, with the pro-Palestinian, but he had such judgments and was such a mean man, holed up in his study all those years, trying to write something that didn't work, mean in the hospital, mean to his wife when he came home. And how do you think his daughter, and taking this baby on the roof, don't you think they're going to do another bris after that? Of course they will. But how could his daughter ever forgive him for leaving the place and going up on the roof? Would she ever want it? I mean, they would think he was kidnapped or something. That was horrific to me. And I wasn't sure what he was going to do up there, really, because I thought the fact that he would kidnap this baby and go all the way up there, how long was he going to be up there? How much time would he stay away? And who would find him? And then would you ever want to have this man take care of your baby again and not know if he's going to bring him back or something? I just thought
Not
it
even
was
take
so,
care,
like,
just come in there.
yeah,
Yeah.
I just thought that he had ruined his relationship with his grandson after he did something like that. How could they ever trust him again?
They're interesting. Sandy, then Lynn.
Yeah, first of all, I agree with all of the above, everything you said. But I have to tell a personal story. I had 3 daughters, so I had never seen a bris or been really involved in planning one. And the few brises that I had been to, the men stood around and the women always were in the background talking, and they didn't really observe anything that was going on. But when I was 37 and I found myself arriving in Israel, I was sitting in a class, an Ulpan class, and suddenly the Menahel, the principal, came into the room and called on me and asked me to come out. And he said, I understand that you have a camera. And I said, yes, I wasn't a big photographer. It was just a small camera. He said, well, we need it. Would you go to your room, please, and get it? So I went and got my camera, and he took me down to the dining hall in the Ulpan. And there was a Russian couple that had just arrived from Russia a few days before. And the woman was dressed ridiculously to the rest of us in the Ulpan. Most of us were Americans. She had on really high red heels. I remember that, and a bright blue dress and a hat that was like a turban and bright red lipstick and red nail polish. And she thought she was very modern. This was a modern look at that time. And so I thought I was supposed to give the camera to somebody, but instead the principal took me up to the front right next to the baby. And he said, take as many pictures as you can, Sandy, because they want to send them to Russia to show their parents that their baby, was had a bris here in Israel. And the baby was a year old,
Hey.
kicking and moving and everything. And I had to take the pictures. I couldn't believe it. They put me right in front of this child. I just kept on closing my eyes and snapping as many times as I could. And he took the roll of, we still had rolls of film in those days. I gave him the roll of film. There were about 36 pictures on there. And he took and had them, I never looked at them. He had them developed and they were sent to Russia. And these people always praised me whenever they passed me in the hall. And
Well, listen, it's a mitzvah to, to attend, and you don't invite people to a bris. You announce it, and, whoever can come comes, and, you want to have a minyan, 10 people there. And I'm sure in Israel, 10 men there. So I'm sure you'll never forget that, Sandy.
I won't, but I just have to tell you the one last thing. About 10 years later, maybe 8 years later, I bumped into the wife. We're now living in the center of the country. She's in Netanya. She's become a nurse. She's so modern Israeli. She's had plastic surgery on her nose. The father has passed away. The son is grown and is doing really well. And she became one of my dearest friends. I loved bumping into her in town. She became a real modern Israeli nurse.
That's a great end of the story. Okay, Lynn and then Elaine.
I have to say, I am having difficulty understanding the reaction to Zusya, because Nicole Krauss does such a beautiful job showing his evolution and character that you can't ignore that. I mean, yes, what you said was previous to his near-death experience. I think Sue Roberts hit it right on the head. It took a near-death experience to start this evolution. If you look, I'm gonna show you a little of the evolution. I won't take a long time. On 25, he's come to life. He's lying in his room. She mentions symbolically the glass was frosted to hide the brick wall across the way, and he could see of the bird. What he could see of the bird was only a changing form moving upward, but he heard the scramble of wings in his thoughts as a kind of punctuation, like a comma striking the white page. It had been years since his mind was so clear or focused. Death had scoured it of the extraneous. There you go. There you start your trigger of, now he had a vision of his life and what it had been like. So if you turn to page 31, no, he couldn't sleep. Somewhere in the wide world, there must be children who were born and raised without precedent. The idea of it sent a shiver of awe down his spine. Who might he have been? Had it been given to him to choose? And the idea of choice was alien to his life. I mean, he didn't even perceive that he had a choice. But his chance had passed. He had allowed himself to be crushed by duty. He had failed to fully become himself. And that is the heart, I think, of the story of finding meaning. Had instead given in to ancient pressures. And now he saw how foolish it had all been. What a waste. Burned brilliant by fever, he had understood everything. The arguments of the dead had been laid out for him, the irreducible proofs of those who knew from the other side. He had died and had been called back so that he might instruct the child and set him on a different path. Go down to the end. The end. He's going over what his life had been like. The endless hours in the dark back room, trying to ignite a broken fuse. Day after day, year after year, the blank legal pad had reproached him with its fine lines. All that was finished now. He hadn't been brought back to life for the sake of absurdity. The man has changed.
No.
I mean, I understand how you don't like him, up to that point, but my God, he envies his daughter for being a person of action. He's trying to, he thinks it's too late for him. I don't think it's too late for anybody to find meaning in their life, especially for us, for us who are retired. this is something, you know, central in our life, is to find meaning. But I don't think it's too late. He perceives it, but he doesn't think it's too late for this baby. This baby is now starting on his life. So for those of you who didn't like him, I'd like to hear more about that.
All right, so we have Izzy, then Elaine, and then we'll,
Well, I thought he did have an epiphany and he was going to change his life and everything was going to be great. But then he came home and so mean to his wife, who went upstairs and got him the clothes. I thought he was going to change and really become a mensch and realize that he had ignored her for all those years and stop arguing. And he was just mean to her when he came home and said he didn't have any clothes to wear. He was going to go in his bathrobe, and she went upstairs and got him an outfit, and he scoffed at it and was upset. And so he was unlikable even after he had that epiphany that he was going to change his life and be a nice person. He didn't change the way he treated his wife. So he may have changed his idea about Judaism, but he certainly didn't change his personal life. And then when he went into the bris, he felt bad. He was ignored. He didn't try to make an effort. I don't know. I just didn't like him. Sorry.
okay, Elaine, Alice, then Merle.
Okay, my granddaughter, who is just 30 now, has a book group. Her book group would not understand this book, would not even read it. I think it's for people our age. And I think we all are putting our personal thoughts of how we have lived. And like Sue said, at this point, people either regret what they did or said, I have a good life and I'm happy with my life. But you need to have some age on you to figure it out. And as far as him being a mean man, he probably did not even realize that he was that way. You know, men of a certain generation react differently than the younger generation towards their wives. And we all, if you think about your life and your children and your grandchildren, the whole world has changed. And this is for people, this book is really for people our age to think about and maybe be retrospective on what we do with our lives. But I don't think a young person would understand at all.
I don't know that I agree with you, but let's go to Alice and then Merle.
Okay, I'm going to comment on a couple things. I agree more with Lynn than what other people have said about not liking him. I saw him as a tortured soul. He was very, conflicted and trying to figure everything out about his relationship with his parent. His childhood was very fraught with a lot of things, and then his relationship with his wife and his children. So I saw him as more tortured. In a way, I almost felt sorry for him. I didn't dislike him at all. Yeah, and going on, he sees what happened with his children. I think he's kind of upset about that he doesn't really, I don't know if he doesn't understand them or doesn't have the relationship that he thought he would have with them. And so then at the end, I'm thinking in a more hopeful way that he thinks that this grandson, maybe he can make the connection with his grandson and, set him off in the right way. So I too, as other people said, was nervous when he was going up on the roof. But then at the end, when I read it, I said, no, it talks about him cradling him and, all these really positive things. And I just think it's kind of a more hopeful ending.
All right.
Everybody sees different things. Right?
Absolutely. Okay, Merle.
Well, at the end, he's very happy that he protested the circumcision, but restored to life, he could no longer parse the infinite wisdom of the dead. Brodmann could not say what it was that he was meant to tell the child. He's unable to parse the infinite wisdom of the dead. He knows, though, the first step was to stop the circumcision. That was his protest. But I think it raises the question of Jewish parenting. When you are given this responsibility of raising a child to be Jewish, how much of a burden of the past are you going to put on that child? Are you going to allow that child to make his own choices? Brodmann's problem was that he was never allowed to make his own choices.
Right.
And ending up a professor of Jewish history, when he saw the history so repetitive and that all of his books just seemed derivative, he had no longer had respect. It raises the question of how do you raise a Jewish child? And honestly, there are so many stereotypes about Jewish families that all the kids are raised to be lawyers and doctors. What if your child wants to be something entirely different? And are you going to stop your child from exploring his own creativity? I think it really raises the question about Jewish parenting.
And I want to go back to what Elaine said, that Sarah, I know her granddaughter wouldn't. I agree with you, they wouldn't choose this book, but Nicole Krauss is 47. So she's closer in age to Sarah than to us. And I think Sarah and her chevra, her friends, could learn from this book. It's well written. I don't know if she's, if the people are Jewish or not Jewish, but I also think this speaks to me in the different generations, because, I look at Brodmann as the age of my parents. My parents were the first my parents are 88. They were a generation that was way more successful than their parents. Like, my grandparents, one lived in apartments, on the south side of Chicago and moved like every 5 years. And and they lived in the city. And my mom, her dad died when she was 16. And like the work ethic, you had to work. Now, my mom became a teacher and then she didn't work because that was also part of of what was happening. And I think our children are lucky, and I guess I was lucky too, to be able to say, I want to do this and I want to do that, and to be able to feel that I had more choice. I don't think Brodmann felt that he had a choice.
Right.
There was no room to be, Zusya, like he could only be what was happening. All right, Elaine.
Okay, I totally agree with you. My husband's generation did what was expected of them. My children sort of did a little bit of that, and my grandchildren do whatever they want. And the men in the marriages have changed their role. My husband was not involved with babies. My son-in-law was very involved with babies, and and my grandchildren probably will be very, very involved. The boys in the family will be very involved. So things have definitely changed. And as far as Brodmann being nice to his wife, when you're an elderly person, I don't think you can change your stripes, okay? Zebras cannot change their stripes. And people are who they are. And when you're an elderly person, you may look back and say, okay, I have a chance with a young baby, because a baby is a rebirth, okay? But the wife, they've been that way for 50 years. They're not gonna change, okay? Let's not kid ourselves, all right?
Yeah.
And we all know who we're married to and what they are. And we sort of say, okay, we accept it, and that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we always want happy endings. And this may not necessarily, it's a semi-happy ending.
I agree with you on that. It's a semi-happy ending. Evie, and you need to unmute.
I also think that there's a spacing with generations. I mean, I have to, embarrassingly, full disclosure here, I had a to-do, I don't know if any of you did, with one of my kids that was very, very unpleasant this week. And we have a bat mitzvah this weekend, which we're not sure if we can go because Julian is so compromised, but I think we'll be able to with double masking and so forth. But like Julian said to me, your relationship is with Hallie. You know, it's the next generation down. And I think because there's enough emotional distancing that they're more open to knowing who you are and you them and so forth. And I could feel that even between my parents, you know, and my children, there was more of an openness than I was able to have with them. So I think just like we need space to discuss things like our own Jewish history or world history, enough spacing, you know, it took a while to talk about 9/11 or the Holocaust. It can't be immediate. So I think the same thing with him and the next generation, he could have a little bit more air, more freshness to, and his own experiences to separate from it a little bit more.
Lynn.
Don't you think that his relationship with his daughters is going to evolve a little bit now since this happened? I mean, we are seeing just this incident at the end. We're not going forward. I mean, that's part of literature too, to predict what you think is going to happen. Now, the incident with the clothes, I agree. I mean, this has been a marriage of 50 some years or whatever. And those patterns of behavior are ingrained in you, and your dynamic is, you know, it's ingrained. That takes a while to evolve. If what we saw here in terms of his evolution in examining what his life is all about and the meaning of his life, I would expect optimistically that his relationship with his wife and his children will also evolve. It won't be perfect. And that's the point of the story. Nothing's perfect. Don't expect the perfect. Go with the good. And so we can't expect a perfect relationship between the husband and wife, you know, a week after he comes home from the hospital. It's going to take time. And if not, you know, the wife seems to be able to handle him. So, you know, we all deal with Michigas in our own families, you know, so.
Before I go to Merle, the other thing I was going to say is nobody's really brought up the whole lesbian sperm donor thing. And I think when we read a story like this in 2021, it's just part of the background. It doesn't stand out to us. And last night we were discussing with Rabbi Cabaret, and there's a whole homosexual part in Cabaret with Michael York, and that was very titillating in the 70s. But now, you know, someone mentioned, you know, maybe they wouldn't have included that, or maybe the movie wouldn't be made because it's perceived as anti-gay. So I just think it's a fascinating, I'm just laying it out there. We have to go to Merle and then Alice. Izzy brought it up for 1/2 second, but it's just kind of part of the background. Okay, Merle.
Mhm. Well, I was trying to envision what conversation he would have with his daughter, who was the mother of the baby. And I think what would happen is she would say, but Dad, we are moving forward. We're not repeating the exact traditions of our religion. We had a moelet instead of a moel. We allowed her to put some topical anesthetic on the baby.
Exactly.
We have an untraditional marriage, and we are moving forward. And I forgive you because I understand that your motivation was good in what you did for the baby. I think they would understand that he's an older man who maybe is even going to go through dementia. And this story was the other side of the coin of the story we read about a man who in midlife changed to Orthodox Judaism and disrupted his family. But I think You remember that story?
Oh, that's right. Yes, it's coming
Now,
back to me.
this is the opposite side of the coin. But I think that he and his daughter would move forward because his daughters are modern women and they're not going to repeat pushing this burden onto their Jewish child.
Fascinating. Yeah. Alice.
Yeah, I actually thought that it brought a little humor into the story. Just on page 34, when Brodman and the sperm donor are walking into the apartment together, and he says, "Grandpa," I don't know, not in a negative way. I just thought it was just showing, this is life.
Mhm.
Things change, but his daughter, wanted to have a child and is, the generations are going forward and it produces a grandson for him. But to me, I smiled when the doors parted to reveal the smiling face of the sperm donor. I just thought that was a little lightness in this.
Right.
Dark story, in terms of, the themes and what was happening. So I just thought it was another example. Nicole Krauss, she really is a very good writer in getting so many different topics and things into one story,
And not a long story. I had to read that twice. Like, where was he on the elevator? Where was he going? Because it's so startling to see, and then there's the sperm donor. He's calling him grandpa. And Ellen put in the chat, she had to leave, but she's going to watch this. We're recording it. She promised me, Ellen, you should be listening. Then on 34 for Brodman's transition. And I think she's talking about on page 34, after a month, the insomnia and migraine stopped and he began slowly to recognize himself again. For months afterward, he was shaken every time he remembered how close he had come to giving up. Inhaling the smell of fresh horse shit in Central Park, seeing the skyscrapers loom up above the tree line, he felt overcome with gratitude. So that makes you feel, Evie, are we getting any closer to liking him?
I didn't dislike him. I just didn't like the story. No, I could relate to him. Unfortunately, I could empathize with him. I had Rahmanis for him, but it was a story itself. But yes, I'm getting, you're making progress in getting me to like the story because I really need all these objective thoughts because I learned from them. So thank you.
Yeah. Marcia Rosenbaum, and you need to unmute, and then Elaine.
Oh, I was just going to say there was a line in there that said that he was shut out by grace. But I think at the end, when he was overcome with gratitude, I think he was also given that grace. And to me, being on the roof with the baby was like a metaphor for him being close to God, even though he was saving the baby, he thought, from the kind of traditions that had enveloped him and prevented him from maybe figuring out other choices and other options. And I think I agree with everyone who talked about with age, you start to reflect on the choices you made and maybe they could have been different. But I think at the end, he started to accept it. And he was given grace. He survived a horrific cancer and horrific surgery where he was not really gone from the world for several weeks, and he awakes, with this amazing child. And I think a grandchild is like a symbol of maybe your feeling of immortality. So I thought it was very hopeful at the end. And, we all think maybe I could have done this better with this child or that child, but with a grandchild, it's kind of, you do have an epiphany and you do feel a flood of grace enveloping you, and also the gratitude. And he had gratitude for surviving and gratitude for this amazing baby, no matter how he was conceived. So,
yeah. Yeah, well put, well put. Elaine,
I think it was very interesting that no one, until Vanessa said something about the sperm donor, that anyone picked up on that. We were so intense on whether he was nice to his wife and how he treated his children. That was my point originally, that we all put our own take on it, and no one really cared where the baby comes from because it's part of life now. And maybe we have evolved, or this little group has evolved somewhat towards the gay community, that no one even mentioned it and no one really cared that. And I think different age groups will react differently to that part of the story.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the end.
yeah, Lynn, and you're muted, so unmute. Oh, and then Merle. No, Lynn, you need to unmute.
You just triggered a thought in my mind. This idea of purpose in life and meaning in life and taking life in your own hands. I mean, there are people who can't conceive and they say, okay, that's it. You know, I can't conceive. She thought she had to do something about it. And so this whole idea of surrogacy or IVF or whatever it is that people have to go through is a major step in taking control of life. And I think for us to ignore that was not, that was,
Well, I brought it up.
I know, I think it just supports everything that we've been saying. I mean, I think he ultimately probably admires his daughter for
Yes.
going through with this,
Yeah.
so.
My
And-
dad sat
and
next to
Marcia,
some.
Marcia's points were excellent.
Agreed.
Excellent.
Agreed. And Merle, I'm going to get to you. My dad sat next to someone at Passover Seder a couple of years ago, and she leaves and he says that, you know, it's just like the immediate family. He goes, what the hell is IVF and why is it so expensive? She had been talking to him the whole Seder about she was undergoing IVF. It's so expensive. And my dad was like, what are you talking about? Anyway, all right, Merle.
Okay. What really brought him back to life was the baby. And my favorite quote in this story was, he was talking about the wonder of his newborn grandson, the whorl of his ear, so perfect. It's like a painting by Fra Filippo Lippi. And that he was a 15th century artist, and he did pictures of Madonna and Child, and they were gorgeous pictures. And that's what brought him back to life. And I thought that was the one thing in this story that I think was so positive, because that's what babies do. Every new baby, it's like this opportunity to start something wonderful in the world. And I thought in that sense, it was not such a sad story, because if he could look at the baby's ear and say it looked like the whorl of a painting by Filippo Lippi, you know, he's being reborn too.
Abby.
Yeah, just the fact of what Merle just hit on was the fact that it was not a Jewish connection that he saw in the baby's ear, that it was something a little bit outside of his normal realm of study and profession history. So that's encouraging to me, a little bit more Renaissance, a little bit more out there, a little more open.
And you know, I don't know what's going to happen to him, or you know, again, it's a short story. It's Alice, I'll get to you, you know, and although the next scene of the daughter of everyone finding him on the roof, that would really be a scene I would like to read through. Alice? Oh, no, you didn't have no, okay. Joyce?
Love what Merle said about the daughter forgiving him and accepting him, and a note of positivity, hopefully, at the end. So I guess I'm changing my mind a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. And maybe having some hope for more acceptance and forgiveness in that family.
Yeah. The other, we have a couple more minutes, but the whole thing of putting him in the reed basket like Moses, I don't know what that's a symbol of, but, and they keep bringing it up. And, Broadman saying, how long must we go on reenacting this charade? We're not slaves in Egypt anymore. What's more, we were never slaves in Egypt. And, he wouldn't give it up. A Moses basket, why? Explain it to me. And maybe he's railing against all these new modern things. It was a mohelet. She had on a big kippah. She had on a kippah. And they had to wait till they couldn't circumcise him in 8 days because he'd been born premature, and they had to wait. So all of these things go against, his firm, foot in tradition. So, Joyce.
Have any of you ever heard of a Moses basket? I've heard of bassinets, but not a Moses basket.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was either.
Mhm.
All right, let's.
I
I
can
think
tell
it
you.
was just a bassinet, and
Yeah.
he interpreted it as such.
Oh, wait a minute. I just Googled it. Merle, what were you going to say?
I think I had one in the 1970s.
Look at
It
these.
was something that you could use to carry your baby around before they had.
Exactly.
I was invited to a baby shower recently for a Jewish girl, which is also not that traditional.
No.
She had 1,000 things. She had registered for 1,000 things. When you had this little basket, you could take it in the car. It was before they had all the car seats and rules about the seat belts. It was just a great little way to take your baby with you to a restaurant.
Oh my God, it's
I had one.
$239.
Well, mine didn't cost that much, but I had one in the 1970s.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, well, now we know what a Moses basket is. And of course, now I clicked on it, I'll be seeing Moses basket every time I go on the internet. Did you want this? No, I didn't want this. As we wrap up here, any other final thoughts? I like this story. Hope we liked it more. Our next story will be in 2 weeks, and it's I am asleep, but my heart is awake. And that will be, it'll be November 3rd. Thank God it's not going to be the day after an election. Did we meet the day after election once? Oh, right. I think we did. And we didn't have a president. Okay. All right. That's like PTSD. That's all I'm saying. Also this weekend is Jim Kenny. And he's always really good. The clergy classes have started up. If you need any links, just let me know. And I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.